Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Dynamics 365 Business Central versus Dynamics NAV 2018. What's new, what's the same, and what's different? We're excited to have you here today and hope to bring you a wealth of value from our technology experts' deep knowledge on Microsoft platforms. My name is Antonio La Rosa. I'm the marketing specialist at BDO IT Solutions, and I'll be your host for this event. Before we get started, I would like to highlight a few features of the platform. You will notice a number of widgets at the top of the viewing area. If you have any technical questions, please use the chat box. Further, feel free to submit your questions in the Q&A box, and we will respond towards the end of the presentation. Our presenters for today's webinar include Darcy Quast. Darcy is a partner with BDO IT Solutions. He leads our D365 Business Central NAV practice with over 20 years of experience in implementing ERP systems such as NAV, GP, and Epicor. Darcy is well-versed in business analysis, implementation, business process reengineering, and project management. In addition, we have Scott Brown. Scott is a manager with IT Solutions, specializing in the implementation of Dynamics 365 Business Central and Dynamics NAV, and will be performing a majority of the presentation. With that, Scott, take it away.
Thanks, Antonio. So, to me, and the reason I wanted to do that is just to briefly share my story of how I got into working with NAV, or actually at the time it was called Navision. So I worked in industry for quite a number of years, and that included implementing the Navision ERP system where I was working. And I literally got so excited and enthused about the product that when opportunity arose, I decided to make the shift into consulting in the NAV area, and I continue to be very excited about participating in working with this product that just continues to get better and better year after year. And that's part of what I'm hoping I can show you today, is how some of the enhancements in the product are in fact making it better, more useful, more powerful. Okay, so there is a lot that's new, and so this is going to be pretty rapid paced. I'm going to touch on as much as I can. It by no means will be an exhaustive look at everything, and like I said, the pace is going to be fairly rapid. So let's dig in and get moving. So first off, I just wanted to give a little bit of a history of Dynamics NAV and the Dynamics 365 Business Central to show where they've come from, and then we'll kind of move on to where they're going. But NAV has been widely used for many years and is a well-established ERP platform with very rich functionality, and it has continued with product enhancements, and since 2015, there's actually been a new major release every single year from Microsoft. The D365 Business Central is, as it exists now, the Microsoft Cloud offering that is based upon the NAV technology. So it is enhanced from a previous D365 product referred to Financials Business Edition, which was less of the NAV functionality, but still built upon it. And we are rapidly approaching the point where the functionality will be full-blown NAV now. This roadmap kind of shows a little bit of the recent history on each of the streams of the product, and ultimately, very shortly, as it shows, we're anticipating being at a spot where both names now become referred to as Dynamics 365 Business Central. So there will be the existing cloud version of that. The current Dynamics NAV 2018 is going to basically get rebranded or renamed so that it follows the Business Central name as well. But rest assured, that does not mean that we are taking anything away from what NAV has and can do. So at this point then, the primary difference that really remains is in the user interface. And we're going to take a quick view of the various interfaces to just see how they do look a little different. At this point, the NAV 2018 has a Windows client that the cloud version of Business Central does not. It does have some advantages that some users may find very helpful. Keyboard shortcuts and saving of views are just a couple of the primary ones. But realistically, the web interface now provides pretty much the full functionality of the system. So back when I started using what was then called Navision, the user interface looked a lot like this. So the users all pretty much saw the same list of menus and saw all the menus, and whatever it was that I needed to do as a user, I had to go find it and know where to find it. And the other thing is that when I opened something up, it always started in this card view like we see here. So jumping ahead and looking at the current NAV 2018 Windows client, it looks like this. Now, it's all based on role centers, and each user can have a different and unique role center. This is only one of them, so not every user is going to be exactly this layout, but the concept is the same, where it's now giving me right in the middle of my screen a nice big visible queues, as they call them, the things that I'm going to do primarily through the day of work, so I can quickly access. Moving on, the existing NAV 2018 web client view is pretty similar looking to what we just saw in the Windows client. If we use the web client, there's no need for any workstation installation. I just need a web browser and connect to the system that way. Now, I'm going to, throughout the session today, run some very quick demos at spots. So I'm just going to use this as an opportunity to take a quick scan around. So there's my screen view, and each of these queues, if I point at it, it gives me a little highlight as to what it is. And basically, that's quick actions to what I'm going to do. I'm going to just go over here and take a click on the customer. Now, the newer interface now starts me on a list, which makes it easier to find things. I open up the list, and now I've got what's the equivalent of that card view, which is where I'd go to make the changes. And close that down, and I'm back on the list view. So one step ahead, this is now what the existing web-based Business Central product looks like. The layout is somewhat different, but really the functionality that underlies this is pretty much the same thing as we had in the NAV. So if I kind of scan around this, it's added a few things like this nice little insight thing that will pop up at me, and again, I can drill into that, find details behind it if I want, which is kind of neat. Now, the major difference in appearance here really is the way the menus are laid out. Here we've got them across the top as opposed to down the left-hand side of the screen. That's what leaves me more real estate to work with. So I'm going to just, like I did on the other one, open up a list of customers. And again, it opens up the customer list, which is now functionally really the same as what we were just looking at in the NAV version. So another thing that has come along fairly recently are client versions of the software that are made to fit nicely on other types of devices. So I don't have to simply work from a computer. This is a view of what a tablet interface would look like, and potentially more important, if I want to be really mobile, I can actually run it on a smartphone. And again, the software optimizes my view for the size of the screen that I've got to work with. Okay, so I've tried to categorize things a little bit here, and the one thing that I wanted to start with that's just pretty significant in my view is the connectivity that has been added in the product recently. So the connectivity with other applications now makes it more seamless when users are accessing other sources of data and information, and that just makes business activities easier. So Power BI, and this is something that's probably a lot of us have kind of heard the term. So I'm going to do just a quick little couple of demos here that will show Power BI, first pulling data out of the source NAV database, and then secondly showing how Power BI actually can get embedded right into the user interface for either the NAV or the Business Central. So this always catches my attention on Power BI is basically a map-based graph, which I really haven't seen anywhere else. And so I've got a simple little example here where I connected to the NAV data, and I am plotting this kind of bubble graph over the cities to where my sales have gone. So the other nice thing about Power BI reports is that I can grant the user some control over setting some parameters. So here I've got a date range, and it's a slider. So when I slide the dates out, it resizes all my bubbles representing the sales data according to that date range. So really flexible and can be set up so that users can actually have some control as to what they want to do to get the analysis they want. So that was an example of a Power BI created report. Right now I'm going to just move into the cloud-based Power BI application and take a quick peek at what we can do in there. And the first thing that's really important to point out is there are apps that are provided and available, and Microsoft has several that are designed to go with NAV or Business Central. So I've loaded a few of them here that go with the Business Central. I'm going to take this one as an example, which is a customer sales type of analysis. So I've got a customer sales dashboard here, which kind of relates my customers with the items that I'm selling most of. So there are the items on the bar, and I've got the customers around this little donut or circle graph. The cool thing is I can click somewhere on the customer and select one, and it resizes the data in the other areas to coincide. So I can see how much of the sales of the items come from each customer I pick. If I want to reset, I just click on the white space, and it puts everything back. And it works in reverse. So I can pick an item, and down here I get a proportion as to how much of that item went to individual customers. So some interactive ability here. Along with this app also comes this built-in kind of customer activity, sales activity graph. So it gives me the last 12 months of activity for the customer in a line graph format. Now, in the Power BI by default, that's getting all my customers, but I do have the ability to go over here and actually pick some filtering, much like in an Excel pivot chart. So I've got to say that looks to me like a little bit of a pain in the neck to filter that way, but there is good news. Here's where the connectivity that I was talking about really shines. So we're going to move now back into my Business Central user interface. And you can already see over in the right-hand side, there's something that says Power BI report, and that graph probably looks pretty familiar. So when I'm on this customer list inside of Business Central, I can pick a customer. And when I do, the graph over on the side reflects the information that customer. So I've got a really quick way of interacting around and viewing graphically the sales history on that customer. And if your eyes are aging like mine and that's too small, then I can actually also go over here and expand the report, which gives me the full page view of what I'm looking at. So I think that really shines as an example of how the connectivity can now give us the capabilities of other applications and just build them right in, so that as a user, I don't even necessarily have to know I'm making use of this Power BI application. It's just all part of what I'm doing on my daily basis. Okay, so I'm not going to have time to run demos on all of these, but I wanted to mention the connection as well with something called MS Flow, which is a cloud-based software tool that allows users to create and automate workflows that go across different applications. Now, what does that mean? Well, I'm going to give you just one example that we could do with a NAV or a Business Central situation. So it may be that every time I add a new customer to my database, it'd be nice if I could send an email to the sales rep that goes with that customer to say, hey, your new customer has been set up in the ERB system and is ready to go. So MS Flow would actually, given its connectivity, allow us to set something up that would monitor the NAV data and say, hey, new customer got added. That triggers a workflow, which then pipes into the Office 365 mail system and says, that means I need to generate an outgoing email, and it would create email with whatever kind of standard text I wanted it to, and pull in the related information out of the customer and then fire it off automatically in the background. So again, expanding the system functionality, that would go way beyond what an internal NAV-only workflow would allow me to do. Okay, so Cortana Intelligence is something that's kind of interesting. I mean, it's a service that provides a suite of things that give me some artificial intelligence capabilities. And it can basically provide us with functionality and information that even not that long ago would have been very, very expensive to get at. Only the largest of organizations would be able to afford it. So I've got a couple of examples that I'm just going to really quickly run through as to how this can integrate with our Business Central or NAV. So one thing that we've got here is an inventory item, and I just called it ABCD to be totally generic, but effectively I can go down here and hook up a forecasting model. Now, there's some parameters behind this. I have a little bit of control as to how it's going to run, but most of this is actually done out in the Cortana suite. So with that set, I can say update sales forecast, and bang, I've got a graph that is projecting my inventory levels based on what it's interpreted, going back and looking at my sales history and so on. Now, I did that manually for this item, but this is something that if we were going to set it up, it's also possible to schedule a periodic automatic refresh on the forecasts in the background. Okay, so one more, and actually this highlights something that's kind of nice about the newer NAV versions as well. Is I've got a associated with my inventory item, I've got a picture. So right in my interface, I've got a view as to what this is. But beyond that, there's an image analyzer that we can access. So I'm just going to, given that I've got the item set up and the picture loaded with it, I'm going to go up and say Analyze Picture. Now that's going out and it's doing its thing, and it feeds back and says, you know what, I'm interpreting that this is something that is red, and it knows that I have an item attribute set up that is for the color, and it actually then populated back when I accepted it that the color attribute on this should be red. So it did some thinking for me. It did give me the option to accept it, and I did. Now, something that's a little bit similar to that, but maybe more basic in the data is the connectivity to an optical character recognition service. So for payables invoices, there is a service out there that NAV and Business Central are designed to connect to, whereby I can load a PDF version of a supplier invoice and then send it up to this cloud service, which does its OCR interpretation and sends back data that will populate into my accounts payable invoice document in NAV. Again, I'm not going to run a demonstration on that one, just to let you know that it is there. Now, the whole Microsoft suite of products, and especially with the cloud emphasis that they've got, everything is becoming more and more connected. So the Dynamics 365 for sales, which a lot of us probably would have previously referred to as CRM, has an interface that can be set up to connect in with the NAV or the Business Central. If you're running Office 365, the whole mail and integration, and we've got the ability to create a common login. So as a user, I just need to log in, and I've provided my credentials for the NAV program and for the Office 365 all at the same time, making life a little easier as a user. I've heard a lot lately of this term API, and it's basically an application programming interface. And the latest release of NAV has added 44 built-in APIs that are defined, which make it easy to share some of the data in NAV with other applications. A lot of these are aimed at master data that's pretty common, and some transactional data. Now again, it's not automatically exposed to other applications, but integration is becoming much more common where we want to be able to talk between applications, and so the foundation is there to make that much easier. Okay, so that was kind of the area of connectivity with other applications and services and so on. The user interface, and it's come a long way. If you remember back to the beginning, kind of the progression through the old version of the user interface and so on. So there's a lot of things that have been changed and improved. And the web client was introduced to NAV a number of versions ago, and when it started, there was, you could run the system in it, but there were quite a few limitations, and one of them was being able to personalize your view from there. Well, you can now do a lot of personalization directly in the web client. And I'm just going to take one really quick example here. So this is my web client view of a customer list, and it currently does not have the customer's currency code on it. So if I want to add that, I can go up here and go into personalize mode and open up here and grab the fields that are available. There's the currency code. I'm just going to drag it on here. There it is. And if it were already there, or even now, maybe I decide I don't want it there, I want to move it, I'll just grab it, drag it, drop it. And when I'm done, click the done button, and this is now personalized for my view. So the next time I open this up, I'm going to see the currency code there. And that was personalization. It impacts me as user only, not anybody else using the system. And that's been available in the Windows client for a while, but again, it's really nice to be able to have a user control to set things up to suit my needs without impacting everybody else. So there's Also, brand new functionality in 2018, which I find really exciting, because it used to be that if you wanted to add a field on a page view, kind of like what we just did, but that wasn't available for personalization, you'd have to actually send the issue to a programmer who would have to go in and actually alter the underlying source code in the system. There is now a way of doing that type of a change right from the web client without having to affect the underlying programming. So I'm going to use an example of it's a function that I can do on AP invoices called get receipt lines, and there's a view as to what I would see, and I've just opened that up in the personalization approach, and the field I'm wanting to see is the original purchase order number that goes with the receiving, and that field is not available here. So previously we would have had to send in a request to the programmers to make a program change that would provide that. So let's see what we can do now. Again, in the web client, I'm going to go, rather than into personalization mode this time, into designer mode. And when I'm in the designer mode, I'm going to go find the place I want to be to make the change. And this is very similar to personalization. I'm going to add a field, except I now have access to really all the fields that are in the underlying data, even if they weren't made available initially to the user to grab through personalization. And I'm just scrolling on down here, and there it is, order number, which is the field I want. I'm going to drag it in right where I want it. And it's now available. So when I'm done, just like saying done personalization, I'm going to stop designing. In this case, however, there's one more thing I need to do. I actually need to save this as something called an extension, which I will talk about a little bit towards the end. And another difference here is when I do this, it is now available for all users. So functionally, I end up in the same place as if we'd done the programming change in the older versions, except we did not have to impact the underlying program code. And that's actually a bit of a theme that I'm detecting as well, is that there's more and more that we're going to be able to do with the system without having to tear into the programming code and make changes. So the user interface, they've continued to make it simpler to use and easier to control. So one of the things that I can actually do is switch my own role center from this My Settings tab if I want. While most users are going to settle on a single role center and keep using it, early on in using the system, it might be useful to explore around and see which one really does suit me best. Now, there's a number of, the term here is notifications, but this is kind of the warning or the warning kind of message that you can get at various places in the system. And it used to be that you had some master setup that you could control, you know, what warnings were on or not, but that was globally across the system for everybody. So there are more than 20 of these now that you can actually control by user. So, and the one I'm going to show you right here is actually new as a notification as well. So by default, I'm just going to open up a purchase order. And when I do and go to close it, it pops this message at me. The document has not been posted. Are you sure you want to exit? So I'm going to say, yes, I do. If I'm the purchasing person entering POs, that's a pain in the neck. I don't want that. So if I go to this My Notifications, I can find that particular notification, warn about unposted documents. I'm going to turn it off. Click OK. And now if I do the same thing, open that up, I'm going to just close it down again. This time, no warning. Now, that's great now that I'm the purchasing person entering POs. But what if I'm the payables person who's actually taking the PO and turning it into an invoice. Maybe I don't want to just accidentally close it down, and maybe I do want that warning. Well, because each person can set the notification, the payables person can have it give the warning without impacting me who just set it to not warn me. So recent trends in the NAV product, they've been adding tools to make implementations easier. So back in NAV 2013, they introduced the Rapid Start services, which provides a lot of tools that just help in a lot of ways with setting up and configuring a new NAV implementation. So recently we've seen some assisted setup wizards added as well, and they can make some of the setup type functions a lot easier. One of the examples is some of the standard workflows for approvals that are available in NAV. There's actually an assisted setup wizard that can walk us through setting it up, which is it's a little more technical, so the wizard makes it a little easier. And bottom line in all of this is that we've got tools to make our implementations more efficient, quicker and less costly. So we've looked at a lot of the more visual changes. There's also some core business functionality that's been enhanced. So I want to touch on some of this as well, because you know, to some of us the actual business function may be more important than appearance and how it looks. So people that are in the NAV system regularly, you know, who may have periodic tasks, and I've heard this a lot. It's like, well, how do I make sure I don't forget to do the, you know, the month-end stuff, or how do I know, you know, what I need to do? So there's now a concept of user tasks, and I can set up user task. I can assign it to myself, or I can actually assign it to someone else as well. So, I mean, obviously I need to be careful that I don't assign things to people and not, you know, who don't know how to do it or don't expect to do it, but it gives me good flexibility. So when the user tasks are set up, we've got a little queue down here that says my pending user task and shows me how many. So I've got one task. I can click there, which opens up the list. If there was more than one, I'd see them all. And then I can edit this particular task. I can see the more details that may be there. And when setting up the task, I can also provide information that will link it to the spot in the system I need to go to perform the task. So now all I need to do is click on the Go To task. In this case, I set the task up to do the adjust exchange rate, which would typically be at a month end. Click there, I can carry that out. I'm not going to actually perform it right now, but if I did, then I basically finish the task, close down the list, I'm back to where I started. I'm going to mark this as complete, and by doing so, it actually updates the percent to complete to 100%. When I finish that, it's gone from my list and back on my user queue. It's removed the count of tasks that I've got. So a really nice way of giving me a way of executing and viewing the periodic tasks that I need to do within the system. So in past versions of NAV, if we wanted to use the functionality to pay employees for expenses and so on, we'd have to set them up as vendors. And then I can record expenses and cut checks or send the EFT payments to the employee. Well, the newest version has actually introduced similar functionality that can be tied straight to the employee. There are a few differences, as in the employee does not make use of purchase orders and invoices, because typically it would be expense reports or whatnot. But this gives me a separate spot that I can actually manage these types of expenses and payables. One of the potential benefits is, because it's using different data tables, I could actually separate by permission who has access. So maybe I don't want my normal payables people to be viewing and dealing with employee expenses. Because it's different data tables, it's very easy to set up the security accordingly. Okay, this one may be fairly minor, but we've now got an ability to do what's called bulk posting. So it used to be that I could post one transaction at a time, or I could do a batch post, which would do everything on my list. We now have the capability of actually highlighting what we want to post, and in this case, I've got 2 out of the 3 lines highlighted. In the image example, when I clicked the post button, it then popped up this little message that's there that says 2 out of 3 will be posted, and do you want to continue? So again, small enhancement, but could be useful. Okay, so I think I've already mentioned that some of the changes are making it easier to basically customize without having to tear into the underlying programming code. So EFT capabilities in North America have been, in the newest version, moved into using this data exchange definition. I'll have a little more on that later, but what it means is that the file layout that's going to get generated to transmit to the bank is actually formatted through a tool that I can get at from the front end. Now, I did put a little warning on here. Depending on the bank requirements, there may still be some custom programming required so that we can actually generate the data that some banks may want to be available, but that's a lot more minor than it used to be. And the other nice thing is, if I've got 2 different Canadian banks that have different formats, I can actually set up 2 different formats because it's not triggering the same format logic as it did when it was hard code programmed, and assign the proper one to each bank. So there continue to be a lot of small enhancements as the software is enhanced. Here's just a few that I found in the NAV 2018 or the Business Central that I thought were particularly useful. So item charge assignment now has a calculation that will do it based on weight or volume, whereas previously I had a choice of either equally by line or based on dollar value. If I'm buying product and shipping it in that's heavy or large, the weight or volume may make a lot more sense to allocate freight costs. Availability of a pro forma invoice from a sales order is kind of nice. Transfer orders, I now have an option to skip the in-transit phase if I've got 2 locations really close together and don't want to bother. And the one that, as an accountant, I really got excited about, I'm going to just do a quick little demo. So the chart of accounts view has always given us this ability to put on a limit totals, which right now this is rendering numbers that are basically everything. So the 2 global dimensions in this demo database, it's project and department, I could create a limit totals on, and that would change the amounts I'm seeing. However, what if I wanted view numbers by a dimension that's not global? In this case, I'm going to go with the area and say I want to see everything that was related to North America. So I happen to be looking at the revenue section of the chart of accounts. And when I set that filter, now the numbers that I see there represent only the sales into the North American area. So that becomes much more flexible, much more powerful for analyzing my my financial information. That one really enthused me. Okay, so there is also functionality that does predate NAV 2018, but a lot of you are probably on versions that are older than 2017, so I just wanted to touch quickly on a couple of them. So deferral templates is something that can be useful. There are times when either an expense or a sale is something that financially we don't want to actually recognize all immediately. We need to defer it over time. So we've got deferral templates available that can help us do this. I'm going to use a quick little example here of we're going to sell a 1-year software subscription, but I need to recognize my revenue over a year. So the deferral template that I got defined tells me what my deferral account is, and it tells me, in this case, it's the prepaid software account, and it also lets me set the parameters as to how I want to defer it. So now when that's on the sales order, as part of our sales invoice, as part of posting it, it will actually defer. So up top, it's putting the whole amount in deferred, and then each month it's going to recognize the appropriate part by making the entry between deferral account and the, in this case, the sales revenue account. Now, I also just want to point out I used another fairly new feature on that, and that was posting preview. So I didn't actually have to post the transaction before I could see what it was going to do. That can be kind of helpful as well. So I did mention data exchange in the context of the EFT. So data exchange does predate NAV 2018, and it's been used for things like the importing of payroll journal entries, importing bank transactions, creating positive pay files, updating currency rates, and this is something that I can define from the front end. Again, I don't have to go into the back end programming and have somebody custom program it for me. So another example of the system making things easier to do without actually altering the program code. Now, the currency rates, I'm going to use that as a quick little demo. I've got something set up here that's going to go and use the Bank of Canada to source currency rates for the US dollar and the euro. So what I need to do is have the exchange rate service configured. Once I do that, it's pretty much done. In this case, I've got one set up to go to the Bank of Canada. I've got it filtered on the Canadian and the US, and that defines which fields of data from there I'm going to use. So with that set up, I can just click the update exchange rates, and it goes and immediately grabs whatever I've defined. And in this case, I've connected to a Bank of Canada service that gives me yesterday's average rate. So what it did is it actually inserted an exchange rate entry, just like I'd done it manually. So functionally, it works just like I did all this work myself manually. Now, I did that update by triggering it, but in reality, if we were going to use this, it would make sense, and we can do it very easily, to schedule it to automatically run the update periodically, likely overnight at some point, so that it's got fresh exchange rates ready for me in the morning. Okay. In NAV 2015, we had the first introduction of base NAV direct emailing functionality, and it applied on the sales side. They've continued to enhance this, so I've got full access to it from the purchase and the vendor side now as well. The other thing that I've got is the ability to define document sending profiles, and they allow me to assign to each trading partner how documents should be delivered. So while email is becoming very common, we may have some customers or maybe some vendors that just basically won't take an email. I have to send them a hard copy document, or they aren't going to pay it, kind of thing. So on the customer or the vendor, I can say, you know, this customer gets it by email and that one gets it, I have to print it, and so on. Now, as a user, I don't need to worry about how I deliver documents to whom. I just click the send and it will know what to do. We also have, I think starting in NAV 2016 now, as part of the EFT generation process, it will go and email the remittance advices as part of the process, rather than having to print them and then deal with each one on its own. And I also now have the ability to put different email addresses on different types of documents. So the sales order confirmation may not go to the same recipient as the ultimate sales invoice. Well, no problem. I can assign an email address to each type of document. So just to show you how easy this is, I'm going to just do an example of sending a sales invoice. So in this case, it's already posted. I'm going to send it again. And I just kind of follow it through by clicking send, and it goes and does its thing. It knows this is an email. It creates the PDF. It attaches it. I can just open it up and take a quick scroll down, and now it's ready to send the email. Now, in reality, I would probably be doing a post and send at the time I'm going to generate the invoice, and then it will know what to do with it at that time. But very simple, very easy, and really quick. All right. Categorization. Microsoft has added enhanced categorization in the area of inventory items and in the area of the chart of accounts, both of which are really nice. So on the inventory side, we have this concept of attributes now, and they are user definable. So here's an example, and it's got color, depth, width, and height. So it means that for this type of thing, those are important to me, and I can define choices of color, and then the numeric fields would be numeric freeform that I can fill in, and then I've got information on the items. Now, right now we're viewing item categories, and they've been enhanced. So they're now actually created to allow a hierarchy. And the key to, or the important thing about that is that the attributes inherit all the way down. So at the top level, which in this case was furniture, I could have put on some attributes like maybe the depth, width, and height. And at the chair level, it inherits those, and then I can add more. When I then go and assign the category to an item, the item inherits all those attributes automatically without having to do them one by one. So very nice way of enhancing my ability to get information on my inventory. So in the chart of accounts, I've now got what's categorization available that relates to GL accounts. Category, subcategory kind of structure. So this is a view of the category definitions, and other than the major blocks of assets and liabilities, etc., they're user definable. And so there's just kind of a quick look at the asset side and how it expands. And I assign GL accounts to it. Once I do that, the built-in financial statement function will generate for me without having to do anything else. And just a quick view of the balance sheet that generates, and there it follows the same categories that we just saw. Now, I do want to say that this does not eliminate the previous ability to define flexible account schedules. That's still there. This just adds an ability to get some easier financial statements generated. Okay, so another thing that is really done a lot to help stay out of having to make programmatic changes is the concept of document layouts. So oftentimes we need to modify things like the check layout to fine-tune it so that it fits the envelope or the stubs exactly, or the printed invoices or purchase orders and so on. There is now an ability through the front-end interface to actually create modified and alternate layouts. That doesn't allow me to change the data that's available, but it does allow me to change how it's displayed. And they've also, I think starting with NAV 2015, added the ability to use Word-based layouts. So basically to edit those, it's something that most people that are familiar with Word mail merge functionality can do, making it easier to have end users actually with the control of formatting the way they want their documents to look out of the system. Okay, well, that's been pretty rapid fire, so I want to just start drawing kind of some conclusions from this. And really, my main conclusion in reviewing this and getting already is we've really got a strong foundation for the future that comes off of a past that gives it the strength. Having the connectivity to other applications is just really making things much nicer for the users to be able to get at more data in a realistic and efficient fashion. The ability to do more in the way of customizing without having to change the source code is nice in that it can make implementations easier and also you know, without altering the source code means that future upgrades would be easier as well. Business functionality continues to evolve and be enhanced, and the ability to have each user have a personalized experience in the system is really nice. Business these days, we're seeing trends towards cloud-based IT. So the whole NAV platform and into the Business Central is really taking advantage of cloud. It fits very tightly with Office 365, and then we've already looked at some of the other cloud-based connectivity to other applications. Now, I did mention extensions earlier, and I want to just highlight this. It's a bit technical, but extensions are a really important enhancement in the technical level of the platform. And what it does is provides a tool to make customization changes to the program without actually impacting the underlying code. It's kind of a layer that sits on top. So if we build customizations or if ISV offerings are provided based on this technology, the real important factor to consider here is it makes future upgrades easier, because if the underlying code is altered, then it's not a matter of just plugging in the new version. We've actually got to go through steps to make sure that we don't kind of overwrite functionality and so on. Okay, now at the beginning we kind of promised to address what's the difference between NAV and Business Central. So what is the difference? The real answer is that very soon there is none. And what that really leaves us with is deployment options. And right now, when we refer to officially the Dynamics 365 Business Central, that refers to the Microsoft web offering. Dynamics NAV 2018 is still the term we're using to refer to other options of NAV implementation. Soon they will all be called the same thing. So let's, I'm going to actually pass the microphone over to Darcy to just make a few closing comments on the differences in the implementation options that we have.
Yes, thank you, Scott. So as Antonio mentioned in the introduction, my name is Darcy Quast. I am a partner here at BDO and responsible for our Dynamics NAV and Dynamics 365 Business Central practice here at BDO. And also, like you mentioned, I've got a long history with the Dynamics NAV and previously called Navision product in my career, and I'm excited, like Scott has shown today, of where the product has come from and where it's going to. With the marketing that's out in the marketplace from Microsoft, et cetera, you will have heard, or you may be soon to hear a lot more about Dynamics 365 Business Central. And we wanted to make sure we did this presentation to kind of clear up some of the confusion, as well as point out the great advancements of the product itself. The key thing to recognize here is that when it becomes one, come the fall, and you start seeing it referred to as just Dynamics 365 Business Central, the key thing to note here is what it really means is how are you going to, as a customer, deploy the product, and what makes the most sense for you in how you deploy the product and how you use it going forward. So Dynamics 365 Business Central on-premise will be a term that you'll hear going forward as they come under one name. And what that really means is that's what you're on today. You have your own servers, you have it deployed in your own IT infrastructure, and you're managing that yourself. So that's the current model. You may also have industry solution verticals, ISVs, attached to your product to enhance it for your business, for your industry. You may have done extensive customizations for your specific business processes, et cetera. So nothing changes there. As you move forward with the product, as you upgrade, you will be using Dynamics 365 Business Central on-premise for as long as you want to have an on-premise solution and when the cloud doesn't necessarily make sense for you. Moving forward in terms of cloud application, where your opportunities are going to be is Dynamics 365 Business Central private cloud. And what I mean by that is basically it's kind of a hybrid. It's you don't have your own IT infrastructure. You want to have your infrastructure managed by someone else so that you're not investing in servers, et cetera. So you can still deploy the product in a private cloud environment on Microsoft Azure, still have your industry solution verticals, but you can add to that managed services to manage the infrastructure for you and still have your solution in your own private environment and be able to do your own interfaces and interaction with it. What the difference is in going to a true cloud model where you're doing the same thing as everybody else is Dynamics 365 Business Central Microsoft Cloud. So you're on the Microsoft Cloud, you're being hosted strictly on the Microsoft environment, and how you'll leverage the product going forward with that is rather those ISV solutions, those industry solution verticals that you may have had in the past will become applications. And you'll see those applications available on Microsoft App Store, and you'll be able to download those applications and extend your use of the product through those applications for your particular need using something you have purchased from the app source. There will still be, you know, the involvement of consultants like ourselves to help you implement those things, but the apps will be available on App Source for particular ISVs. And then you'll also still have the ability to do minor customizations yourself, not yourself, sorry, with a partner, but we will have the ability to do customizations and leverage them through extensions like Scott mentioned there. And using the Microsoft Cloud, the important thing is your interfaces with other products will be through web services. So very powerful. You will still also be able to leverage that and interface with some of your other systems through the use of those web services. And really another opportunity, you know, especially for us here at BDO, is Dynamics 365 Business Central on what we call the BDO cloud. And really where our opportunities there are is we focus on very specific industry verticals ourselves, being financial services, energy and natural resources, manufacturing, distribution, not-for-profit, retail, and we're able to leverage the product and use it to develop solutions for those industries specifically, and pull in strategic industry solution verticals, offer packaged implementations and certain industry IP into those things, and also offer a shared environment with managed services so that we can reduce the cost for our clients in those areas. So really just to conclude on this and to summarize, as it becomes one name, you're still getting all the same great functionality, you're still getting all the new features and everything that Scott has gone through, and it really just becomes a matter of what makes sense for you. Does the cloud make sense for you, or are you still an on-premise customer and it makes more sense to be in that environment, or do you want to leverage the scale that you can from an industry solution, and we can help you with those things. So hopefully that's helped take away some of the confusion around Dynamics NAV versus Dynamics 365 Business Central, and with that I'll turn it back over to Antonio to close things up. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you again, Darcy and Scott, for the presentation today. At this time, I know we're getting close to that hour mark, but if there are any questions, I would advocate that you please post them in the Q&A box and we can get to those. That being said, Scott, there was a question around the 22-minute mark towards the beginning. The question was, is there a self-serve vendor portal where we can upload their invoices rather than it coming into my AP department?
Self-upload, I'm not sure I know the context.
Might have to go back in the slides there. It was around the 21, 22-minute mark.
Okay, I'm assuming that might relate to the OCR interpretation. Sounds the most likely, and if that's the question, it's a very specific service that NAV has been configured to work with, so basically the user doesn't, there's some setup, but the user doesn't need to worry about it. It's all within NAV. You kind of click the send for OCR and it would feed it back. So
sorry, Tom, I'm just going to interrupt you. The individual says that's correct. Is there a web portal similar to an ADP type of offering that we could utilize?
So for this functionality, it is what it is. It used to be Lexmark, and they've changed their name that provides the service, and it's very specifically configured for that one. So I'm not going to say you couldn't service somewhere else, but that would require customizing the interfaces. So
awesome. Another question here: does the BDO Cloud offer a SOC1 control report for its clients? I assume that the Microsoft Cloud would.
Darcy, are you still there?
Yeah, sorry, Antonio, can you repeat the question again?
Sure. Does the BDO Cloud offer a SOC1 control report for its clients?
SOC1. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with what SOC1 stands for. If they can clarify that.
Sure thing. I will wait for that question to come through.
That does kind of sound like a technical question that we might have to refer to our cloud group.
Yes.
Sure.
Which we can do. And if you have that person's information, we can get back to them. Certainly.
I do. It's an American version of a 5970 report that auditors use to ensure controls were operating. That might be a very industry-specific question. So
very specific question that we can get back to them on, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So I have that information, and we'll get in touch with the correct industry person. All right. Don't see any further communications or, oh, here we are. Are the CPD credits available for this webinar? Sorry, I'm not sure what a CPD credit is.
It's probably somebody who's an accountant who needs the basically education credit.
I see. Okay.
And we don't actually have a mechanism to download certificates based upon it.
Okay.
But I suppose we could provide Antonio, do you actually have the ability to confirm that somebody was on for the whole thing?
I should be able to afterwards, yes.
Okay. Because I don't know whether the institute takes an email confirmation as evidence, but we could do that.
Sure. Okay, I believe that's all for the questions that I see coming in. So with that being said, again, I want to send a special thank you out to everyone who presented. There will be a follow-up email that will include contact information of the speakers, as well as a recording of the webinar. Once again, thank you everyone for joining, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day.